The message arrived at Galactic Federation headquarters with little fanfare. Another scout ship had found another inhabited world, one of dozens discovered each cycle. The data package was filed, categorized, and eventually reached the desk of Senior Intelligence Officer Tull. Tull's 6 eyes blinked in sequence as he reviewed the information. The planet called Earth seemed unremarkable at first glance. Oxygen atmosphere, moderate technology, divided nation-states. The dominant species called themselves humans. Computer, display visual records of the inhabitants, Tull commanded. The screen filled with images of humans going about their daily lives. Tull noted their strange bipedal gait, their soft skin with no natural armor, and their apparent lack of enhanced senses. By all measures, they should be easy prey for any spacefaring civilization. But something caught his attention. Computer, what is happening in these night cycle recordings? The images shifted to darkness, buildings lit by artificial light, humans moving about freely despite the absence of their sun. Unusual, Tull muttered. Very unusual. Most intelligent species across the galaxy evolved as diurnal creatures, active during daylight and sheltering at night. Even spacefaring races typically maintain these patterns, their ships and stations mimicking their homeworld cycles. Humans, however, seemed oddly comfortable in darkness. Tull drafted a brief note in the file. Species demonstrates a typical comfort with low light conditions. Recommend caution in night encounters. The file was sent to the general database, where it sat ignored for months. Admiral Dorn of the Vex Empire slammed his armored fist on the table. Their defenses are primitive. Their weapons are crude. Their planet is rich with resources we need. His war council shifted uncomfortably. The Vex had broken from the Galactic Federation decades ago, tired of peaceful exploration and diplomacy. They took what they wanted, when they wanted it. The Federation protocols forbid contact with developing worlds, his science officer reminded him. The Federation can burn in a supernova for all I care, Dorn growled. We need those minerals. Prepare the invasion fleet. The science officer hesitated. Admiral, our initial scans indicate some unusual characteristics about these humans. Are they stronger than us? More advanced? More numerous? No, but then they pose no threat. Dismissed. 2 weeks later, the Vex invasion fleet entered Earth's solar system, massive ships moving into position beyond the moon. Their stealth technology was advanced enough to evade Earth's primitive detection systems. In the command center, Admiral Dorn reviewed the final invasion plans. We will begin with small daylight raids on isolated areas, he explained to his officers. Test their responses, evaluate their military capabilities, and prepare for the main assault. Admiral, his science officer spoke up, I've reviewed the Federation intelligence file. It recommends restricting operations to daylight hours until we better understand human behavior in darkness. Dorn laughed, a harsh sound that made junior officers flinch. Are you suggesting we fear the dark, Officer Mel? Like hatchlings? Not fear, Admiral. Tactical caution. These humans show unusual comfort with darkness. They may have advantages we don't yet comprehend. Nonsense. Our night vision technology is superior to anything these primitives possess. Dorn turned to his war map. We attack as planned. Small raids begin tomorrow, at Earth dawn. Within 1 cycle, we will control their major resource centers. As the officers filed out, Science Officer Mel lingered, staring at the blue-green planet on the display screen. Something about these humans troubled him deeply. Their cities remained illuminated through their night cycle, buzzing with activity when most species would be safely sheltered. What kind of creature evolved to thrive in darkness? He shuddered slightly before following the others. Perhaps it was nothing. After all, how dangerous could these soft, primitive beings possibly be? The Vex would soon find out. The first Vex landing craft touched down in an empty field outside a small Australian town as the morning sun crested the horizon. Their metallic hulls gleamed in the daylight as hatches opened and soldiers deployed in perfect formation. Perimeter secure, the squad leader reported. No resistance detected. This pattern repeated across Earth's less populated regions: New Mexico deserts, Siberian plains, African savannas. Small VEX units establishing footholds, testing human military response times, gathering intelligence. Admiral Dorn watched from orbit, six eyes fixed on the tactical displays as data streamed in. Their military responds exactly as predicted, he noted with satisfaction. Conventional forces, predictable patterns, limited tactical flexibility. His intelligence officer nodded. They rely heavily on technology that our systems can easily disrupt. Their aircraft are particularly vulnerable. And civilian responses. Mostly panic and evacuation, as expected. Some resistance from local security forces, but nothing our troops can't handle. Dorn's mouthparts clicked in the VEX expression of pleasure. Excellent. Begin Phase 2. General Laura Martinez stared at the map in the Pentagon's Crisis Center, red dots marking VEX incursions multiplying by the hour. They're prodding our defenses, she told the assembled military leaders, testing our capabilities, our response patterns. Why only daylight attacks? Asked an Air Force colonel. They've landed troops at dawn, withdrawn them before sunset, then repeated the pattern the next day. Unknown, Laura replied. But I don't like it. They're being too careful, too methodical. These aren't just random strikes. Our forces are reporting some success, another officer noted. We've defeated several VEX units when we can bring our heavy weapons to bear. Laura nodded. But they're learning from each encounter. Notice how they never make the same mistake twice. She zoomed in on a sector where National Guard units had repelled a VEX force. They're studying us, she said quietly, and we know almost nothing about them. In the small town of Riverdale, local police chief Bill Mason organized a community meeting as sunset approached. The VEX had been spotted just 20 miles away that morning. We've received instructions from the military, he told the worried crowd. If the aliens come, we're to evacuate immediately. No resistance. From the back of the room, an old hunting guide named Tom raised his hand. These things only attack during daylight. So far, Bill confirmed. They withdraw at sunset. Tom exchanged glances with several other outdoorsmen in the crowd. Seems mighty strange for advanced aliens to be afraid of the dark. A murmur of agreement ran through the room. Military says their night vision is probably superior to ours, Bill explained. They're not afraid of darkness. They're just being methodical. Maybe, Tom said thoughtfully. But I've been tracking game in these woods for 50 years. Night or day makes all the difference in who has the advantage. 1 week into the invasion, Admiral Dorn called his command staff together. Our initial assessment is complete, he announced. Human military forces pose minimal threat to our technology. Their weapons are primitive, their tactics predictable. Maps displayed successful VEX operations across Earth's surface, all conducted during daylight hours. Science Officer Mel, what about your concerns regarding human night behavior? Mel stepped forward reluctantly. Admiral, I still believe caution is warranted. Our data shows humans maintain significant activity during their night cycle. This suggests adaptations we may not fully understand. Have we lost any units to night attacks? Dorn asked pointedly. No, Admiral. But we've been withdrawing before nightfall as a precaution. Dorn's exoskeleton clicked in annoyance. This caution costs us valuable time. The Federation observers are watching our progress. We must show decisive victory. He turned to his war council. Prepare the main invasion force. We will establish permanent bases in these locations. The map highlighted targets across Earth's surface. And Admiral, Mel ventured, will we maintain the daylight-only operation protocol? Dorn fixed his 6 eyes on the science officer. No, we will operate on our standard military schedule. If these humans have some special ability in darkness, I want to know now, before we commit our full forces. As the command staff filed out, Dorn added, "Begin night operations immediately. Let's see if these humans have any surprises for us." They would not have to wait long to find out. The sun dipped below the horizon over the small town of Riverdale. Shadows stretched across empty streets as the last Vex patrol marched through, their armor gleaming under the fading light. Primary sweep complete. No resistance detected. The patrol leader reported to his command ship, commencing night surveillance pattern. From her hiding place in an abandoned shop, Captain Lisa Miller watched the aliens through night vision goggles. During 2 days of occupation, the Vex had been methodical and efficient. But they were about to learn why humans had always feared the dark, and why they had mastered it. "All units, check in," she whispered into her radio. One by one, voices responded: police officers, military veterans, hunters, and ordinary citizens who had trained for weeks since the first Vex ships appeared. They all shared one key trait: comfort with operating in darkness. "Remember the plan," Lisa said. "No tech, no lights. They can detect those. We move like our ancestors did, by touch, by sound, by memory." The first stars appeared overhead as the Vex patrol split into smaller units. Their helmet lamps swept across buildings, creating pools of harsh light. "They're making the oldest mistake in the book," Lisa thought. "Using lights when they can't see." She gave the signal. In his orbital command center, Admiral Dorn frowned at the sudden burst of emergency signals from the surface. "Report," he barked. "Ground units in Sector 7 report attacks across multiple positions," a communications officer replied. "Audio feeds contain unusual sounds." "Play them," Dorn ordered. The command center filled with chaotic noise. Vex soldiers shouting, weapons firing, and something else. Strange whistles and calls, mimicking natural sounds but clearly used as signals. "Switch to visual," Dorn demanded. The screens showed helmet camera feeds from ground troops. Most showed only darkness or quick, blurry movements before cutting out. One showed a Vex soldier firing wildly at shadows while unseen attackers struck from behind. "What is happening?" Dorn roared. "Where are the humans?" "They appear to be using the darkness, sir," his tactical officer said. "Moving without lights, attacking from multiple directions, then vanishing." "That's impossible. Our night vision technology is superior to anything these primitives have." Science Officer Mel studied the remaining feeds. "It's not about technology, Admiral. They aren't using technology. They're moving through familiar terrain by memory and touch. And look at their movements. They're completely comfortable in darkness." Back in Riverdale, Lisa's team moved like ghosts between buildings. They had disabled the Vex's perimeter sensors with simple tools: blankets thrown over detection posts, mud smeared over optical sensors. The town's teenagers proved especially effective. Years of sneaking out at night had made them experts at silent movement. Hunters tracked by sound and smell rather than sight. "Unit 3, in position," came a whisper through Lisa's radio. "Execute," she ordered. Across town, carefully planned ambushes sprang simultaneously. The Vex's advanced armor offered little protection against simple traps. Pits dug in streets, tripwires across alleys, nets dropped from rooftops. By midnight, the Vex battalion was in full retreat. "Impossible." Admiral Dorn slammed his fist on the command console. An entire battalion defeated by primitives without advanced weapons. The survivors report the humans seemed to melt into the darkness. An officer reported nervously. "They attacked without warning, without fear." One survivor reported a human child guided their unit into an ambush. Mel added, "A child who moved through absolute darkness without hesitation." Dorn's expression darkened. "Order all ground forces to suspend night operations immediately, consolidate positions, and resume operations at dawn." As the orders went out, Science Officer Mel studied the planet rotating below them, its night side dotted with city lights. What kind of species evolves to master darkness rather than fear it? He wondered. And what other surprises do these humans have waiting for us? The Federation observation vessel Seeker of Truth maintained its position in high orbit, cloaked from both Earth and Vex detection systems. Inside the science bay, lead researcher Vala studied the incoming data with growing fascination. "These readings can't be correct," she murmured, her slender fingers adjusting the neural scanner. "Run the analysis again." Her assistant obeyed, and the same results appeared on the screen. The brainwave patterns of humans showed remarkable shifts between day and night cycles. "It's as if they become different creatures after dark," Vala said, leaning closer to the display. "During daylight, their brains show standard patterns: reasoning, planning, social awareness. But at night, the screen showed red and orange flares across the human brain models. They access ancient neural pathways, predator instincts, heightened awareness. And look at this, the fear response is actually reduced in many subjects." "Could it be an adaptation?" her assistant asked. "More than that," Vala replied. "I believe we're witnessing the legacy of their evolutionary history. These humans didn't begin as daylight creatures who learned to tolerate darkness. They began as night hunters who later adapted to daylight." On the Vex command ship, Admiral Dorn faced a growing crisis. Reports from ground forces described increasingly savage night attacks by humans. Not just military personnel, ordinary civilians were fighting with unexpected effectiveness after sunset. "They're just appearing out of nowhere," a field commander reported, his voice tight with stress. "No heat signatures, no electronic emissions. We'll be securing a position, and suddenly they're among us. Last night they disabled 3 hover tanks without using a single energy weapon." "How?" Dorn demanded. They threw sand into the air intakes, sir. Simple sand. Then attacked the crews when they were forced to open hatches." Science Officer Mel stepped forward, datapad in hand. "Admiral, I've analyzed all night encounter reports. The humans are using extremely primitive but effective techniques against our forces. They're exploiting our reliance on technology." "Primitive species don't defeat advanced armies," Dorn growled. "These aren't just tactics, Admiral. Look at these recordings." The screen showed infrared footage of humans moving through forests and ruins. Their movements were different than during daylight, lower to the ground, more fluid, using all available cover. They moved like natural predators. "Their body language changes at night," Mel explained. "Their hearing sharpens. They coordinate using sounds we can barely detect. And most troubling, they seem to enjoy it. Enjoy combat. All species fear death," Dorn scoffed. "Not fear, Admiral. Excitement. Their brain chemistry shows increased pleasure responses during night operations. They've evolved to find thrill in darkness." Deep in occupied territory, Commander Jack Thomas and his Special Forces team prepared for another night mission. Unlike regular troops, they had trained for years to maximize human natural advantages in darkness. "Remember," Jack told his team as they applied mud to their faces, "the Vex see primarily through technology. Their natural vision is poor in low light. They're used to being the hunters, not the hunted." One of his soldiers grinned. "They've never dealt with a species that grew up telling scary stories around campfires." "Exactly," Jack nodded. "Most species evolved to fear darkness. We evolved to master it, and then chose to create horror movies for fun. They don't understand what they're facing." As full darkness fell, the team moved out, their movements silent and practiced. They didn't need night vision goggles or thermal imaging. They moved by touch, by memory, by instinct, abilities their ancestors had honed for thousands of years before electricity existed. Jack felt the familiar calm settle over him as darkness embraced them. Humans were the only known species in the galaxy with a concept of night life, who willingly sought out darkness for pleasure, entertainment, and advantage. The Vex were about to learn why. General Mark Wilson stood before the hastily assembled War Council, the room lit only by a single dim lamp. Representatives from militaries across the globe leaned forward to hear his words. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've confirmed what many of us suspected," he said, his voice steady. "The Vex are retreating from all-night operations. They've consolidated their forces in daylight-only positions." A murmur ran through the room. After weeks of devastating losses, this was their first real advantage. "Their technology gives them superiority during daylight," Wilson continued. "But darkness belongs to us. It's time we take the fight to them." The plan was simple but bold. Coordinated night attacks across all Vex-held territories. Special forces would lead, but civilian resistance groups would provide crucial support. "Remember, these aliens evolved on a world with minimal night predators," Wilson explained. "They never developed the instincts we take for granted. Use that." In the occupied city of New Harbor, Vex Commander Grek ordered his troops into defensive positions as sunset approached. The aliens had seized the city's port 3 days earlier, but had suffered increasing losses each night. "All units, activate perimeter sensors," Grek commanded. Full illumination of all approach vectors. Powerful lights snapped on, bathing the area around the port in harsh brightness. Hover tanks moved into position, their sensors sweeping for movement. "Let them come," Grek muttered. "We're ready this time." What the Vex commander didn't notice was the slight ripple in the harbor waters, where 12 human combat divers moved silently beneath the surface. They had trained in darkness for years, in waters far colder and more dangerous than this harbor. Above, the Vex had created a wall of light, never realizing they'd left the water completely dark. On the Federation observation vessel, researcher Vala watched the unfolding battle with professional fascination and personal horror. "They're attacking from below," she noted as her instruments tracked the human divers. The Vex never considered underwater approaches. "Their species evolved in deserts," her assistant commented. "Water is foreign to them." The humans emerged from the harbor like ancient sea monsters, silent and deadly. They avoided the illuminated zones completely, moving through patches of shadow that the Vex considered too small to hide threats. "Look at this," Vala pointed to her neural scanner. "The humans in combat are showing heightened pleasure responses alongside normal stress markers. They're experiencing what they call excitement or thrill during night combat." "That's disturbing," her assistant replied. "It's unprecedented," Vala corrected. "No other known species enjoys darkness or danger. These humans seek it out." Inside the port complex, Sergeant Tom Reed led his team through maintenance tunnels that the Vex had deemed too small for threats. The aliens, with their rigid exoskeletons, couldn't imagine creatures willingly squeezing through such tight spaces. Final charges set. Tom's radio crackled. Primary targets covered. Tom checked his watch, a simple mechanical timepiece that emitted no signals the Vex could detect. "Execute in 3, 2, 1. Across the port, carefully placed explosive charges detonated simultaneously. Not on the Vex defenses, but on the power stations feeding their light barriers. Darkness fell like a curtain across the port. In the command center, Vex Commander Grek frantically ordered backup generators activated, but the humans had anticipated this, targeting those as well. "Switch to night vision," Grek ordered, his voice rising with unfamiliar emotion. Fear. But the night vision systems showed only chaos, smoke, dust, and shadows that seemed to move with purpose. They planned this, Grek realized too late. They didn't just adapt to darkness, they'd weaponized it. Outside, human forces moved through the darkened port like ghosts, striking with precision born from millennia of evolutionary comfort with night. Where Vex soldiers hesitated, humans advanced. Where Vex technology failed, human instinct thrived. By dawn, New Harbor was back in human hands. The recording spread across the galactic networks despite Vex attempts to suppress it. The footage, captured from a damaged Vex soldier's helmet cam, showed the fall of their largest Earth base during a single night of combat. In dimly lit war rooms throughout the galaxy, military leaders watched with growing unease as shadows moved with impossible speed through darkness. Human forms appeared briefly in flashes of weapons fire, their movements fluid and purposeful where most species would be blind and terrified. "Turn it off," Fleet Commander Zex ordered, his scales shifting to a pale yellow, a sign of deep distress among his kind. "I've seen enough." His intelligence officer complied, but couldn't hide her fascination. The humans retook their city without advanced technology. They used the darkness itself as a weapon. "Impossible," another officer protested. "No species can see in absolute darkness." "They don't need to see," the intelligence officer explained. "According to Federation research, humans have evolved multiple ways to navigate darkness. They use touch, sound, smell, and memory. They've trained their young to move confidently without light for thousands of years." On the Federation diplomatic station orbiting neutral space, Ambassador Lyon of the Vex Empire faced uncomfortable questions from the assembled representatives. "Your forces have suffered 7 major defeats in the past 14 Earth days," the Federation mediator noted, "all during Earth's night cycle. Do you wish to request terms for withdrawal?" Ambassador Lyon's pride warred with practicality. The Vex had never retreated from a conquest, but the casualty reports were impossible to ignore. "The situation is being reassessed," he admitted finally. A murmur ran through the chamber. The mighty Vex Empire, with technology centuries beyond Earth's capabilities, was being driven back by what many had dismissed as a primitive species. "We have reports," the myriad representative said, her multiple eyes blinking in sequence, "that human fighters can move silently through complete darkness, appearing and disappearing at will. Is this some form of technological advantage we were unaware of?" "No technology," Lyon replied bitterly. "They're simply comfortable in darkness. Where our soldiers hesitate, they advance. Where our sensors fail, their instincts guide them." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Every spacefaring species had evolved as daylight creatures, developing technology to overcome the limitations of darkness. But humans had apparently evolved differently. On Earth, Major Emma Davis led journalists through the recaptured ruins of Chicago. The Vex occupation had lasted just 3 weeks before a coordinated night assault drove them out. "The turning point came when we stopped trying to fight on their terms," she explained as cameras recorded her words for global broadcast. "They expected us to rely on technology, night vision, thermal imaging, communications networks. When we went low-tech, using methods our ancestors developed before electricity existed, they couldn't adapt." She pointed to simple tools laid out on a table: mud for masking body heat, cotton for dampening footsteps, bird calls and animal sounds for signaling. "Most of our most effective units were people you'd never expect," Emma continued. "Hunters who track prey by sound and smell, indigenous scouts who navigate by memory and touch, even city kids who'd spent years sneaking out after curfew." The reporters laughed, but Emma remained serious. The Vex never understood what they were facing. Humans don't just tolerate darkness. Many of us seek it out. We're possibly the only species in the galaxy that created entertainment based on being frightened in the dark. That night, as the report was broadcast worldwide, Vex ships began lifting off from their remaining Earth bases, retreating to orbit. Their invasion, which had begun with overwhelming technological superiority, was collapsing in the face of humanity's most basic adaptation: our ancient mastery of the night. Across the galaxy, military strategists updated their files on Earth with a simple but crucial warning: attack only during daylight hours. The night belongs to humans. Ambassador James Holloway stepped onto the Galactic Federation's central chamber for the first time, squinting slightly under the bright lights. After 6 months of negotiations following the Vex retreat, Earth had been formally invited to join the interstellar community. The chamber fell silent as he walked to the podium. Representatives from over 200 worlds watched, some with curiosity, others with poorly concealed unease. On behalf of Earth and humanity, I thank you for this welcome, James began. His simple words echoed in the vast chamber. The Federation's senior counselor, a tall being with iridescent skin, stepped forward. Earth joins us as a sovereign member, with all rights and protections this entails, she announced. But I must address what many are thinking. Never before has a species joined our ranks after defeating an established power in direct conflict. James nodded, understanding the diplomatic challenge. Earth's victory over the Vex had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. A primitive world had humbled a major power. We seek only peaceful relations, he assured them. The conflict was not of our choosing. Later, at the formal reception, James noticed how other species maintained a careful distance. Their body language, even among vastly different biological forms, communicated the same emotion: caution. A small group of Federation scientists approached, led by researcher Vala. Ambassador, I hope you don't mind some direct questions. Not at all. Is it true that humans voluntarily spend time in darkness for entertainment? James smiled. Of course. We have nightclubs, evening walks, camping under the stars. Many of our most popular activities happen after dark. The scientists exchanged glances, and your species deliberately creates scenarios to frighten yourselves. Horror movies, I believe they're called. Some of our most popular entertainment, James confirmed. Being scared in safe conditions can be exhilarating. The word didn't translate properly, causing confusion among the listeners. The concept of finding pleasure in fear was apparently unique to humans. 6 months later, the newly established Earth Embassy on the Federation capital world had become an object of intense curiosity and subtle fear. James noticed that few visitors came after the station's artificial night cycle began. His aide, Michael, entered the office with a datapad. The Vex have signed the formal peace treaty, he reported, though they insisted on some unusual provisions. Let me guess, James said. Restrictions on human movement during night hours on Vex worlds. Exactly. And they've requested that all diplomatic meetings be held under full lighting. James leaned back in his chair. They're still afraid of us. The whole galaxy is, Michael replied. Did you see the new trade regulations? 6 different species have requested that human merchant ships only dock during daylight hours at their spaceports. Have our cultural attaches been explaining that we're not actually night monsters? They've tried, Michael said with a shrug. But the stories have taken on a life of their own. The Vex defeat was too dramatic, too unexpected. Most species simply can't comprehend how we function so well in darkness. James walked to the window, looking out at the gleaming towers of the Federation capital. The station was entering its night cycle, and lights were brightening to compensate. Maybe it's not such a bad thing, he mused. Peace through deterrence. No one wants to risk finding out what happens if they attack Earth after dark. There's already a saying spreading through diplomatic circles, Michael added. I'll meet you after dark is becoming the most feared threat in galactic politics. James laughed. If they only knew most of us are just watching videos or sleeping. On the diplomatic channel, a message flashed. Another world requesting formal relations with Earth. The 5th this week. Amazing how quickly we've gone from primitive newcomers to respected allies without changing a thing about ourselves, James observed. We didn't need to change, Michael replied. The galaxy adapted to us. Outside, the station lights brightened further as the artificial night deepened, a small but telling concession to the strange new species who had taught the galaxy to fear the dark.